You like this? At first glance, you have an arrow in your head, but just in case, we'll do a COVID-19 test to be sure. Well, actually, I've made a film that I wanted to show you that is about 4 minutes long, which also will reverse the flow. Are you good with that? Yeah. Just to set the scene. Let's reverse the flow.
So far we have used around 50 patients already, and based on the preliminary the results, and we found the mortality for the patients using vitamin C is around 24%, while the mortality from the control group is the 35%. Decreased the IL-6 level compared to the control group, significantly decreased the the duration of the mechanical ventilation.
This is not the virus that's hurting the host, it's the acute inflammatory dysregulated response. That's why you need to use vitamin C and steroids. If you look at the Shanghai guideline, they did 3 things. They gave heparin, they gave vitamin C, and they gave steroids.
Having seen what vitamin C could do, I decided to start giving vitamin C very early. Let's say you are a patient that comes to me with shortness of breath and an abnormal CT scan like the ones that have circulated among some of us. And that is the moment when I do my intermediate unit and I start you on the cocktail. And we've had several variations of what we have done for the cocktail. I have not had a single death, not one death. And I'm getting slammed with 4 to 5 patients unit minimum. You don't need to sell me the vitamin C thing. I know it works.
Intravenous vitamin C, intravenous ascorbic acid, along with corticosteroids, given at the right time, not for mild illness. This is for when the oxygen is dropping. The virus is essentially taking over the lungs. A massive inflammatory response is occurring, and it needs to be done extremely expeditiously within hours, if possible, of presentation to emergency rooms.
When a person starts to have sore throat or nose running, he or she should start take regular vitamin C, for example, 1 gram per every hour.
I take 1 gram of vitamin C twice a day to support my general and immune health, and 1 gram an hour if I get any symptoms of a cold. I've rarely suffered for more than 24 hours, never taken a day off work.
In 1976 to 1977, when another swine flu epidemic is expected, it is especially important that everyone know that he can protect himself to a considerable extent against the disease and its consequences by the use of this important nutrient, vitamin C.
please sign up here. We are, when the research paper is out, we're going to start an international campaign, which will be called Vitamin C for COVID.com. But if you sign up here, we'll transfer your data across, and then we'll have to email you again, because the new website allows you to say exactly who you are, what your qualifications are, and so on. But at least we'll have you in the list. We have about 4,000 sign-ups already. So I'm going to zip through some of the stuff about vitamin C. This is me with Linus Pauling back in the 80s. You saw his book. You know, he already knew what was going on. I've told you about this extraordinary man, and the book is dedicated to him. He spent the last 39 years of his life on the science of nutrition and vitamin C and suffered 39 years of unfounded abuse and denigration, and continues to do so from the ill-informed, ill-advised, and poorly educated medical pharmaceutical community, who in so doing have deprived humanity of one of the most extraordinary, cheap, and non-toxic medicines. This has to stop. I was actually giving a lecture the other day, and in the middle of it, somebody stood up. I think they were drunk, actually, but said, you know, Linus Pauling was proved a fraud. You know, he was discredited. I said, you want me to admit to the 200 people in this room that Linus Pauling was a crank? And he said, yes. I said, okay. Linus Pauling was a crank. And do you so know what the definition of a crank is? It's a small, efficient tool designed for starting revolutions. Anyway, so you know your immune system is both your skin and your gut, and we produce the B cells and the T cells and the macrophages. Here is a macrophage gobbling up bacteria. You're making 2,000 immune cells every second. Here is a virus. It has spikes called hemagglutinin, which help the virus to get inside cells, which are blocked by black elderberry. It has other spikes called neuraminidase, which help the virus to break out of cells that they've invaded and infect others. That is blocked by vitamin C. Your T cells now attack the virus, and macrophages, which are like vacuum cleaners, attack the virus, and they are boosted by vitamin C, by zinc, and by vitamin D. There then starts a war where there's a lot of oxidant activity, both from the virus and our cells. You can think of them as oxidant bullets. And our ability to produce those are helped by selenium and vitamin C. It reloads our immune system. Once a cell is invaded by a virus, it starts to produce as rapidly as it can interferon. And the SARS-CoV-2 virus inhibited its ability to produce interferon. Vitamin C, on the other hand, boosts the ability to produce interferon. This particular virus targets hemoglobin, red blood cells, in a very interesting way. The hemoglobin holds oxygen with iron in this wonderful shape of the heme. What the virus does is it invades, and it uses the red blood cell like a Trojan horse. And it knocks out the heme, so you start to get lots of circulating iron, which is a tremendous oxidant. Think of rust. So then the liver has to produce tons of ferritin to try to grab the iron. So we have a cascade in COVID where the iron changes from stable to unstable, sets up a chain reaction of oxidation. The liver has to work really hard to make ferritin. The production of nitric oxide goes down, and that puts the cardiovascular system into stress. Oxygenation index plummets, so that's why some need breathing assistance. And it's not the virus, but large amounts of dead virus particles that trigger the cytokine storm. The immune cells overreact, white cell count shoots up. The immune cells run out of ascorbic acid. They can't recycle it fast enough. They can't make nitric oxide. Then T cell levels plummet. Inflammation rockets. Liver, heart, lungs become under major stress. And adrenal function and cortisol crashes. The body stops fighting. And everything here is reversed by ascorbic acid plus steroids and anticoagulants. So you have this early phase of viral replication, and if you don't sort out the infection very, very quickly, there can then be this secondary stage where the immune system kicks in and you go into a state of immune dysregulation. and usually, by week 3, let's say. No one dies from the virus, they die from the cytokine storm. And this is the same thing that occurs in sepsis. You saw Professor Paul Marek, he's one of the authors on my paper. Doctor, your septic patients have scurvy. Almost all COVID-19 ICU patients tested have scurvy levels, often with undetectable levels of vitamin C. You really want your vitamin C to be well above 60, but 50 is considered adequate. That's the level that our UK government say is an adequate level. Borderline is kind of below 30. And this US ICU survivors have a level of 29, and their non-survivors have a level of 15. Half of their non-survivors are below the scurvy level. In this Spanish study, 17 out of 18 have undetectable vitamin C below the scurvy level. And in this ICU, the average is 22. So that's what's going on. Vitamin C is made by all animals. Ever since the beginning of oxygen-based life forms, there has been vitamin C. It's a very, very ancient molecule. Plants make it from fructose. Animals make it from glucose. There's a 5-step dance to making it. And we lack one functional enzyme in the last step called gluconeolactone oxidase, or GOLO, as it's called. We actually don't lack the genes for the enzyme. The genes have got a bit of code stuck in them that makes them not work. It's called a codon, like a full stop in a bit of computer code that stops it working properly. It may be possible, who knows, in the future to unblock it. But we do actually have the genetic instructions. They're just a bit messed up. From ascorbic acid, well, I'll show you that a bit later. What happens is when an oxidant, a free radical, comes along, it's like a wanton bachelor looking for a mate. And vitamin C can donate an electron to make it stable. In fact, it can do that 2 times, and then it can be recycled. So often you hear people say, this is the best antioxidant, or this is the best antioxidant, and so on. But there's actually nothing better than vitamin C, and they really work together. It's so brilliant at how it functions and gets recycled. Here's a short film for you.
Like the guinea pig, apes, bats, and some species of fish, do not generate ascorbate in their bodies. Animals which do generate their own ascorbate make a lot of it and produce even more when they are sick. An adult goat, with a weight roughly that of an adult human, makes about 13,000 milligrams daily, and when faced with life-threatening diseases or severe toxic challenges, goats can produce as much as 100,000 milligrams of vitamin C per day. Animals which don't generate their own ascorbate eat a lot of vegetables. An adult gorilla in the wild will eat a whopping 18 kilograms of vegetation, the equivalent of 4,500 milligrams of ascorbate in its food.
Or I'd rather a banana.
Extrapolating from the natural diet of apes, Pauling argued that for a human adult eating only vegetables to generate 2,500 kcal, an acceptable daily level of food energy would entail also consuming 2,300 milligrams of ascorbate. Consequently, he believed that the RDA set at 60 milligrams per day in the US and 40 milligrams in the UK, and based purely on the amount of vitamin C needed to avoid scurvy, was much too low.
So one of the best papers on vitamin C and infections is by Professor Harry Hemmeler, who's helped us a lot with our research. So if you want to get up to speed, it is a superb paper in the journal Nutrients. And I'm a co-author of a paper on vitamins and COVID, which came out a couple of months ago by a number of professors. And what we're often told, there's no point taking lots of vitamin C because you just excrete it. And what actually happens if you're not sick is that you will continue to get an increase in plasma at a very, very steady rate, up to about 200 milligrams. And after that, you do get increased plasma up to certainly 2.5, if not 5 grams. but the rate of ascent is less. So the more you take in, the less you absorb, percentage-wise. But that's when you're healthy. When you're sick, it's quite different. Here's a friend of mine, Dr. David Fonerow, and he's measuring here the effects of a 10-gram gulp of ascorbic acid, which is what vitamin C is, versus sodium ascorbate, when it's attached to a sodium atom to make it more alkaline. And what you can see is that vitamin C is very rapidly absorbed in the stomach in a high acid environment. Ascorbic acid is an acid. It needs an acid environment for direct transfer. Probably if you're taking omeprazole, you will not absorb your vitamin C in any way, in the same way. And it's interesting that nature always puts vitamin C in acid foods, in citric fruits. So you get a whopping and very rapid increase in blood levels. And then you can see it drops down and up and down and up and down and up. There appears to be a sort of recycling effect. Here is 10 grams of sodium ascorbate. Doesn't achieve quite as much. It looks like the ascorbic acid actually works better. Here you have the same thing, but this time comparing ascorbic acid versus intravenous sodium ascorbate. And this is measured in minutes. And this could be the first ever recording of the recycling of vitamin C in this way. Big increase, dip, increase, dip, increase, dip, increase, dip, increase, dip. That probably is the recycling of vitamin C as it's spent and turns into dihydroascorbic acid and then gets reloaded back to ascorbic acid. And I'll show you how that works. The sodium ascorbate intravenous steadily increases blood levels. And vitamin C does lots of things other than as an antioxidant. So ascorbates are still good, but when I've had people in my Facebook group going through COVID, they do say the ascorbic acid works much better in the symptom relief than the ascorbate. Some people are great fans of liposomal vitamin C, which is bound to a fat, so it can be transported as a fat would be. And here you have the only study actually published on liposomal. So that's placebo, that's the regular vitamin C, and that's the liposomal. So you can see that there's I think it's a 15% benefit after 4 hours. But I would honestly say the logic is probably, if you want to get to high vitamin C, use ascorbic acid to the bowel tolerance, and then you can add on liposomal. So in other words, you get up to the point it causes you loose bowels, go down some, and then use liposomal thereafter. But also also from a cost point of view. Liposomal is a lot more money. But ascorbic acid is very good. This is a packet of injectable ascorbic acid. And when have you ever seen this on a drug packet? It says there are no contraindications to the administration of ascorbic acid. However, as much as 6 grams have been administered parenterally, injected to normal adults without evidence of toxicity. You actually can die if you drink 10 liters of water in a few minutes. You cannot die from ascorbic acid. Linus Pauling was fascinated by 3 things. One, here is a substance where 10 milligrams saves your life from scurvy, and yet 100,000 milligrams is not toxic. Where animals that make vitamin C effectively don't get viral diseases, there are a few, but very, very few, and they don't get cancer. And his super sharp mind decided to focus on vitamin C, viruses, and cancer predominantly for 39 years of his life. What happens is vitamin C is stored in the adrenal glands in very large quantities. And when there's an environmental stressor, including a viral attack, the adrenals release vitamin C and cortisol. So when you stimulate the adrenals with adrenocorticotropic hormone, pituitary telling the adrenals to activate, this is the level of vitamin C that you get going into the bloodstream. So that's fascinating. Vitamin C is clearly a hormone. This is the hospital, Zhongnan Hospital at the University of Wuhan. You saw Professor Peng talking in the film, and overall 5 out of 26 people, 19% died in the vitamin C group, and 10 out of 28 died in the placebo group. So a 25% difference in mortality. Unfortunately, they needed 140 people for the study to have its power, statistical power, but when they shipped in that 50 tons of vitamin C and gave it to everyone, within about 6 weeks, there were no new admissions. You know, so they had to stop the study, only having a much smaller, you know, group of people. Of the most critically ill, 18%, 4 people in the vitamin C group died to 50% in the placebo group. 68% less mortality. I showed you all this earlier, you know, massive reduction in inflammatory marker, pulmonary function, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I showed you this earlier. And this is the, you know, even if we call this a pilot study, this is a result that nobody in medicine, you know, can ignore. This is not a small effect. It demands, you know, more study. So, you know, the average ICU mortality is 41%, 29% mortality in the only intensive care unit in the UK using intravenous vitamin C, only 2 grams. They wanted to give 4 grams. Professor Paul Marek, he uses 12 grams, 6 grams or 3 grams every 6 hours. He had 6.5% mortality. And in Houston, you saw Professor Joseph Farron, he had 3.5% mortality. No deaths in anyone who isn't both over 85 and has an end-stage disease. Right? And they're using the MATH Plus protocol. M is for methylprednisolone, the steroid. A is for ascorbic acid. T is for thiamine. H is for heparin anticoagulant. And the plus is for vitamin D, zinc, quercetin, and so on. So this is Switzerland. They employed the Society of Nutrition to give them recommendations to government, and their recommendation is this complement is targeted to strengthen the immune system. We recommend that you tell everyone in Switzerland to supplement 200 milligrams a day of vitamin C and 2,000 IUs of vitamin D. The reason for 200 milligrams is you will have nobody with scurvy levels of vitamin C if everyone takes 200 milligrams. It's not enough to stop an active infection, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. So when we launch vitaminc4covid.com in about 2 weeks, and if I get your email on the other place, if you wish, you know, and you're clever, you don't forget, just write this down and join it in 2 weeks, and you'll see how that goes. But we have various demands. Have our government and its public health and nutrition agencies thoroughly assess the evidence and fund studies of this inexpensive and safe nutrient. Have our government recommend all supplement vitamin C based on the available evidence as Switzerland is proposing. Stop vitamin C for COVID, corona, or colds being classified as false information in both digital broadcast and print media. Allow GPs, doctors, and nutritionists to recommend high-dose vitamin C for anyone with cold symptoms or COVID infection to reduce duration and severity of symptoms. Test all COVID-19 patients for vitamin C status. Give vitamin C to COVID-19 patients as early as possible on hospital admission and intravenously in ICUs, as China is doing already. So those are our, you know, demands, and I think they're demands that we can win. And, yeah, watch this. I just made this. This kind of will explain things to you, because it's always hard to explain to people, isn't it, how antioxidants actually work. Making energy generates oxidant exhaust fumes. Oxidants age and ultimately kill you. Vitamin C disarms water-based oxidants. Vitamin E disarms fat-based oxidants. Vitamin C and vitamin E reload each other. Glutathione reloads vitamin E and C. Anthocyanins in berries reload glutathione. Coenzyme Q and lipoic acid reload vitamin E and vitamin C too. This is the antioxidant team that keeps you healthy and young. You know? So, you know, it's hard as nutritionists to explain these things, isn't it? So that kind of does it. And that is the core, you know, but around this we've got niacin and NADH, and over here we've got thiamine, You know, and then we have selenium and zinc and copper and manganese, and we've got all the methyl nutrients as well. So that's why when people say this is the best antioxidant, etc., they are a team. But very much in the center of that team is vitamin C. And when I want to measure somebody's immune status, I always measure the red blood cell glutathione. It's a very, very good indicator of antioxidant and immune status, if you measure one thing. But yeah, we've now found these pee sticks, urine sticks, you just pee on them, vitamin C deficient, just like that. Costs you nothing. So it's called VitaCheck is the product, and we've tried to import it from America. But, you know, I think all care homes should be testing everybody, you know. Everyone going into hospital, just, you know, it's the easiest possible thing to check. And what I like about encouraging checking is that if you check and you find someone's deficient, you've got to do something about it, really. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to share. You know, there's another half hour of this, but we've had enough. That's vitamin C. Yeah. So